Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into my show, Web3 Deep Dive. Web3 Deep Dive is the only podcast that goes in depth on all topics related to Web3, including blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, AI, the metaverse, and more. I'm your host, Rachel Wolfson, a well-known journalist, author, and public speaker who has been covering the blockchain sector since 2017 for various publications like Forbes and Cointelegraph. Before we get started, please make sure you subscribe to the Web3 Deep Dive channel and be sure to click any notification button so you stay up to date on the show's new content. And remember, this show does not offer any financial advice. It's purely educational and entertainment purposes only. I also want to thank my sponsor, Wursta, for producing this show. Wursta is a global technology consultancy with headquarters in Austin, Texas, and Quito, Ecuador. Wursta helps businesses make sound technology decisions on everything from security and collaboration to infrastructure and Web3. Without further ado, let's get started with the show. Today, I'll be speaking with Brittany Kaiser, a data rights activist. We will be discussing the state of cryptocurrency in the United States, regulations, and how all of this relates to the Web3 sector and innovation here within the United States. These are all very important topics, so I'm so excited for this episode of Web3 Deep Dive. Let's get right to it. Hey, Brittany, how's it going?
So good. I'm so happy to see you here in Austin again.
I know. I feel like we just saw each other last week because we did.
We did.
But this time is different because you are a guest on Web3 Deep Dive, which is so exciting.
Absolutely. So pleased to be here.
Yeah. So Brittany, before we get started into the depths of Web3, maybe explain a little bit about yourself. You are a data analyst. Is that the title that you go by, or?
Usually data rights activist, I think, encapsulates what I like to put most of my time towards these days, especially over the past couple months, or maybe really the past 5 years in general, where I spent a lot of my career in human rights activism, environmental rights activism. But since I went full-time into tech, I've mostly been working on digital rights and making sure that we can protect our human rights, our civil rights in the digital space while we lead these digital lives. And over the past couple months, I've really started to ramp up some regulatory work, specifically because I find that our Web3, our crypto industry, our blockchain industry is under threat in this country and in many others.
Right. Well, I agree. I feel like the crypto industry in the United States is under threat, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So you've written a book, correct? It's called The Great Hack.
Oh, my film was The Great Hack, but my book targeted the Cambridge Analytica whistleblowers' inside story of how big data, Trump and Facebook broke democracy. It's not a light read.
Right. It doesn't sound like a light read.
No.
And so you have a book, you've been featured on Netflix and a documentary. So how did you transition from that into the cryptocurrency space, and now I guess what's evolving into the Web3 sector?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough that my best friend and business partner in 2011 was mining Bitcoin. They were $1 at the time, and I went with him to Mongolia to check out what was the first Bitcoin mine I had ever seen. It was outside of Ulaanbaatar, where it's freezing most of the year, and there were all these computers on shelves, and I thought, okay, so you guys are printing money here. I gotta learn more about this. And so throughout the next year or two, I was often paid by my business partner in Bitcoin for all of the things that I did. And if I had business expenses, he'd reimburse me in Bitcoin after I spent, British pounds or dollars or euro, whatever it was. And so I started to learn how to use it. At the time, I was training as a human rights barrister, and I spent a lot of time in Geneva at the UN, in Brussels at the European Parliament. And I happened to be in Brussels at the European Parliament for a meeting on human rights in North Korea. And at the same time, there was also a hearing basically looking at Bitcoin for the first time and seeing if European banks would ever be able to actually bank Bitcoin companies or interact with Bitcoin in any way. That was the first time that there was really a regulatory meeting on Bitcoin in 2014. And that's when I thought, okay, well, this is getting more serious. This isn't just more of underground cyberpunk and kind of underground human rights activists kind of thing, because in those circles, Bitcoin was really popular already, but it wasn't really permeating into other industries or other communities. So from 2014 for the next couple of years, I just kind of kept an eye on it. And in 2016, I decided I really wanted to go full-time into blockchain technology. I think I should probably back up, which is not long after that 2014 meeting at the European Parliament. I joined a company called Cambridge Analytica, which most people have heard of by now. But that was while I was writing my human rights PhD. And my doctoral thesis was on something called preventive diplomacy, which is how do you prevent crisis, war crimes, atrocity crimes, before they happen, which is all about data science. What data are governments, militaries, and other organizations having access to? How is that data being analyzed? And how quickly is that real-time information actually being used? And so the only way that I could write my PhD was to learn more about data science. So I joined Cambridge Analytica part-time at first and then ended up going full-time when I was fascinated by what was going on in the world of data science. And in the end, most things that go on in any type of technology are based on at least basic data science. So for me, that was my first time really going into tech full-time. My first time had been on the 2007-2008 Obama campaign, where I joined the new media team, and that was the first time I ever used analytics. But I hadn't really, hadn't trained as a developer. I hadn't gotten really into it. So after I joined Cambridge, that was the first time I really started to get into advanced forms of tech. After a couple of years there, I realized that data science wasn't something that I really wanted to be a part of. I didn't find the way that data science was used by especially most big companies, but also a lot of governments and militaries to be compatible with human rights. And so I wanted to go full-time into blockchain technology. Now, Cambridge was the first real job I had ever had, so I stayed there for a while and started a blockchain department within Cambridge and started helping early blockchain companies doing their data-driven advertising, doing their data science strategy, internal, external communications. And I thought, well, if I am advising blockchain companies within Cambridge, I actually could leave Cambridge and get into crypto and blockchain without these people. Mm-hmm. So I quit the company, became a whistleblower, and after a couple months of basically being a full-time whistleblower, I started to being able to incorporate what I had done through most of my life in terms of legal advocacy, activism, and start doing that in the blockchain space. My first work in the blockchain space was actually moving to the state of Wyoming to support Caitlin Long and the legislators there on all of the crypto laws. And I ended up moving to the state of Wyoming, actually, and staying there for many years.
Right. So I met you in 2017 at South by Southwest. And that's also the same time I met Caitlin Long. You introduced me to her. Let's go back to 2017, because blockchain within the United States and crypto within the United States, that looked very different in 2017. Can you paint that picture for our listeners as to what was happening in 2017 with blockchain and crypto?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it looks kind of similar to some of the issues that the industry is having today, and it's weird that it's really a 5-year cycle. But in 2017, crypto started to become quite a lot more popular, and there were a lot of people who were deciding to use their entrepreneurial spirit to start a new company in the blockchain space. And I was wanting to go full-time into this industry, but I was seeing so many of my friends get their companies taken away from them. And what I mean by that is them getting sued by the SEC, or because of regulatory lack of clarity, there being such high legal fees associated with going into the industry in a responsible way that people were shuttering their companies because they weren't able to pay their legal fees, whether it was because they were fighting the SEC or they were preparing to not have to fight the SEC. Either way, it wasn't an easy space for new entrepreneurs and for small companies to be able to navigate. So when we met, it was a time where I felt like if I was going to come into this industry, I couldn't just come in and build a for-profit company. I had to come in and work on the regulatory side, which was my expertise. I had done lobbying and legislative drafting for a lot of my life. I have 4 legal degrees, and really I spent a lot of time thinking that I would just be working in law for the rest of my life. But instead, I figured if I'm going to work in tech, I need to leverage my legal background and help sort out some of the regulatory work first. And then once the regulatory work seems like enough has been done, that we have clarity and that we can build our companies comfortably and without an insane amount of legal expenses, then I could go forward and move into the for-profit sector in blockchain.
Got it. So, and Caitlin Long, by the way, let me just back up. She is the CEO of Custodia Bank. Mm-hmm. They are a crypto bank based in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's a lot of issues happening there, which, you know, if you want, we can elaborate on that. We don't have to. But I just think in general, within the United States, because there still is this lack of clarity within the crypto and blockchain sector, we're seeing a lot of businesses struggle. Can you just elaborate on that and maybe explain what's happening today?
Absolutely. So I think it's easier to start from where I just left off in 2017, which is when Caitlin Long, who at the time was not yet the CEO of Custodia Bank, but she was beginning to be a legal activist in the blockchain space. I would say she didn't mean to be that at first. She actually was trying to make a donation in Bitcoin to one of her alma maters, the University of Wyoming, and she found out that it was illegal for her to do so because she would need a money transmitter's license to actually do that. And she was trying to set up a fund for female developers. Specifically, she went to University of Wyoming and then to Harvard. And so finding out that she couldn't do this donation, it doesn't stop someone like Caitlin. She decided, I'm definitely going to make this fund in Bitcoin. I just need to change the law first. So
easy. Let's just change the law and everything will be awesome by 2023.
So she set off on a journey. She luckily met Representative Tyler Lindholm, who was a House rep in the state of Wyoming that was already trying to get rid of the money transmitter's license. And so what they wrote, they collaborated together to put together the first blockchain bill in the state of Wyoming, which was a Bitcoin exemption to the money transmitter's license. So therefore, the Money Transmitters Act did not apply to anyone that was just transacting in Bitcoin. That allowed Caitlin to then go and make her donation. So she accomplished that, but she didn't stop there. I was introduced to her not long after she started working on this bill. And I, right after quitting Cambridge Analytica at the end of 2017, went to Wyoming to work with her and all of the rest of the legislators and start producing more pieces of legislation. The reason why she later became the CEO of Custodia Bank was because she actually was very intent on putting together a digital asset banking license for the first time in the United States. And that was something we worked on for a long time. And that was a banking license, which I think a lot of people might laugh or cry when they hear this. But we passed this 4 years ago, and it was the first banking license since the 1700s that had an 100% reserve requirement. So it meant you had to have 100% reserves in your bank to account for all of the deposits from your customers. Shock and awe. No banking license in the United States had that requirement since the 1700s. So what we passed was a banking license where everyone that was going to be regulated under that license would have to be completely responsible, where a bank run couldn't put that bank in trouble, where it wouldn't be possible for the bank to go into liquidation because they would have that 100% reserves. Now, Caitlin with Custodia Bank eventually got one of those licenses after we passed that bill, and proposed to actually have an 108% reserve for Custodia because she is catering to institutions. So any company that would like to bank their digital assets with Custodia Bank would know that all of their digital assets are safe. Another thing we wrote into that bill specifically, which I think is really important, is that the actual bank has a fiduciary responsibility to the customers instead of the investors. What that means is that the bank has a responsibility first to take care of the needs of the clients, and then secondly, the needs of the investors. That is the opposite with basically every other bank. Banks are there to make money for their investors, and the safety and security of their clients is secondary.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, so obviously you just gave us a lot of information. So I kind of want to focus the conversation now on what we're seeing today within the crypto industry in the United States, because what you just talked about was a lot of innovation. It seems pretty hopeful, but we've kind of entered this stage where a lot of people, spirits are a bit down, regulations are still unclear. We're seeing the SEC go after Coinbase, CFTC go after Binance. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing today, and what is the solution? How can we ensure that crypto is safe in the United States and that people still want to innovate here rather than going offshore?
So we have a lot of work to do for the United States to have a chance at continuing to be a crypto hub. As I said, in 2017, when I thought, hey, I'm definitely going full-time into this industry, I realized we had to sort out regulation first. After having the amazing opportunity to work with Caitlin Long and the rest of the legislators in Wyoming, we have passed nearly 30 pieces of legislation on digital assets, the most comprehensive set of legislation in the world on digital asset definitions, where if you really wanted to start a business, you might more easily do it in Wyoming than even Switzerland or Singapore or some of the other very popular jurisdictions for a blockchain technology business. Now, that was only a state. Since then, many other states, I think 16 or maybe even 20 or more now, different states in the US have looked at the regulatory aspects of Wyoming and have at least introduced bills, if not passed laws, that are based on what we did in Wyoming. More than 20 other countries have done that as well. But the federal government in the US has not.
Right.
So not having federal law in the United States leaves these decisions completely to the regulatory agencies, like the SEC and the CFTC. Now, so far, not only do we not have the federal legislation, we do not have agreement between the different agencies of which agency actually has purview over which types of assets. The CFTC just came out and said a number of different digital assets or crypto tokens fall under commodities.
Right.
The SEC has said a lot of those similar tokens or digital assets are securities. So there is no clarity from agencies, and there's no clarity from Congress or even from the White House or the Treasury on how we're supposed to look at any of these asset classes. That is a huge problem, given in the state of Wyoming, we defined a utility token in law 5 years ago. So in the past 5 years, somehow, the difference between a utility and security in the digital asset space and any further clarity that actually allows people to build their businesses without being afraid of being sued by a government agency, we just haven't gotten there yet. So when I say there's a lot of work to do, it's on many different levels, and over the past few months, it's gotten even more complicated. One, I would say, and since you asked me what we do need to be doing today, What we need to do is have the U.S. government at the federal level adopt some of the legislation that has been very popular and well functioning on the state level. Wyoming is obviously number one, but there have been plenty other states that have adopted successful blockchain technology legislation that has brought a lot of business into that state. In Wyoming, we brought tens of billions of dollars into the state of Wyoming by bringing regulatory clarity. We brought some of the biggest companies in the industry from abroad to the United States. That was completely huge and an obvious success.
What year was that, by the way, when Wyoming started seeing these businesses come?
2018.
2018. Got it. Okay.
The first set of legislation was passed in March 2018.
Got it.
And then hundreds and then thousands of blockchain companies started either re-domiciling and moving or setting up for the first time in Wyoming.
I remember this.
It was huge. There was this massive windfall of entrepreneurship coming into the state, and that was good for not just Wyoming, but good for America. Now, there have been plenty of other states, and since we're in Texas, I have to hand it to Texas. They have done incredibly on passing plenty of legislation that has brought a lot of companies specifically to Texas in this industry, more Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining than anything else. It's so important for us to think about what that means for this state and for the United States, and hope that the federal government can start to take these states seriously and take this legislation as a model for what will work federally, because it has been successful at the state level and it can be successful nationally. These are not laws that are politically biased. They're not left. They're not right. These are laws that are good for entrepreneurship in this country. And otherwise, American entrepreneurs are creating their companies abroad.
So my question is, so like Texas, for example, because Texas is a Bitcoin-friendly state. Senator Ted Cruz, when I saw him speak at the Texas Blockchain Conference here, was very enthusiastic about Bitcoin. But I'm wondering, so states like Texas, Wyoming that are innovative and pushing for digital currency adoption with kind of regulations that are clear, so what's the difference between the Texas versus the federal? Why is the federal level not adopting these regulations that we're seeing in Texas or Wyoming? Like, why is that so challenging for states to kind of have their voices heard on a federal level, in your opinion?
I think number one, it's because this industry is being politicized. Unfortunately, we now have a blue versus red situation where Democrats are coming out against crypto and Republicans are coming out for it. And anything that ever gets politicized means that the best you're going to get is 50%. And it's very, very hard to get that. So if you can't get a clear majority because this is a bipartisan issue, then nothing goes forward. And so that's the unfortunate problem that we're getting into now. So depoliticizing crypto and trying to not make it a left versus right, but showing that so many Americans, no matter what other policies they believe in, will be single issue voters on the crypto issue, I think is something that is going to start to become obvious. There are a lot of big Democrats in this industry that are coming out and saying, well, I can't vote for my Democrat representatives because they're coming out against crypto and that will destroy my entire livelihood. So I can't vote Democrat anymore. And that's a big problem, in my opinion, that this is being used as a party tool against other parties. I don't like that the Republicans are using it against the Democrats. I don't like the Democrats are using it against the Republicans. It doesn't work for me on either side. And so that is really sad. But I think the best way to overcome that is for everyone to show up. The reason why the legislation in Wyoming was so successful was because we had hundreds, probably now thousands of people from all around the world in this industry come and testify in Wyoming. Testify for bills, testify for amendments, show up at the State House, show up at the Banking Commission, show up at the governor's office. And in the beginning, no one could believe that there were people flying in from Singapore and Switzerland and Hong Kong to Cheyenne, Wyoming, to say crypto is the most important issue to me. So I came here. I'm not even American, and I came here because I care about what you guys are doing. And I think that's what we need to see happen in DC. If there are Americans where this is your biggest issue or one of your biggest issues, if you are working in this industry at all, whether you're American or not, America not blacklisting the crypto industry and not blacklisting anyone that tries to do business with American people in this industry globally means that it is a worldwide issue. It's not just Americans. It's not just people in crypto. It is anyone that does business in this industry at all needs to set aside a budget, needs to set aside time. And if you don't have time, then increase your budget and donate to some of the organizations that are doing incredible work in this industry.
So you said they need to show up. Is there a specific event that people that you're going to be at in DC or that we should know about to show up, or specific campaigns that people can donate to say, hey, crypto adoption in the United States is important and we don't want this innovation to go away?
So there was just one big event. The Government Blockchain Association just did a big event in DC. I would say there's not one specific event yet. There are going to be some that start to pop up that I know about that are being organized. But what everyone needs to do is stay vigilant and look at the organizations that are on the ground. I would say look at what the Digital Chamber of Commerce is doing, look at what Coin Center is doing, look at what Satoshi Action is doing. There's tons of groups in this space that are actually doing work on the ground. Some are 501c3s or C4s, so they're nonprofits in this space, advocacy organizations, charities, and some are specifically lobbying organizations that are doing all of the legislative meetings, that are doing legislative drafting and proposing bills. And so all of these different organizations are either for crypto in general, for Bitcoin specifically, Bitcoin mining specifically. There's a lot of different groups depending on what your business is in or what your interest is in. And we need to back these groups and give them both boots on the ground, extra people that will show up and give physical testimony or give written testimony or even come on to Zoom and give oral testimony. We need people to write letters. We need people to show up in congressional offices. We need people to make phone calls and emails to all of your representatives and say that you care about this issue and you will make this one of your biggest issues when you're deciding who you're going to vote for. And that is not just, it's not going to work when there's only one person per company. It's everybody needs to take it on board as part of their mission. And I really feel right now it's mission critical, because 5 years after we started to have serious regulatory success in this industry, in this country, we're at a place where most people choose not to do business in the United States, not to start their business here, and not to even let Americans be involved in their business, whether to invest or to be a client.
Right. I want to ask you a tough, kind of an interesting question with what you were just saying, because now we're seeing in the United States kind of companies being pushed out. Do you think that a lot of this stemmed after the FTX collapse and after Celsius and after BlockFi? Because it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, everything seemed pretty nice up until like FTX, and like the shit hit the fan with FTX. And now I just feel like these regulators like the SEC and the CFTC are just really clamping down in ways we have never seen before. Was this sparked because of the FTX situation?
I wish I could say that it was just that. I feel like the failure of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried's crimes against the American people and others were an excuse for it to happen now. I don't think that a lot of these regulatory agencies were ever intending to let crypto get too big or too popular or to, eventually one day outpace the use of fiat currencies. So
money, by the way, for people that don't know, fiat money, dollars. Some people don't know. So
of course,
right.
Yeah. So if anyone wanted to use Bitcoin more than they wanted to use US dollars, of course, there are certain regulatory agencies within our government that are not interested in that. There's a lot of money that is not interested in that happening. So there's a very powerful lobby against crypto. Totally understandable. We all know that that exists. And there's definitely agencies within the government that are not interested in our industry growing. And that has become very obvious recently. So FTX really kicked it off in terms of the public unveiling of how some of these agencies felt and different pockets of government felt. But I think that this was coming anyway. I really do. And there's a lot of people that agree on that topic. So because it has now become such a crackdown at the moment, it is why it is so essential for people to make this a top priority. If you intend to do business in the United States in Web3 and crypto, in blockchain and distributed ledger and NFTs, whatever part of the industry you're touching, I'm going to go back to, you mentioned my angry tweet thread from last week. And I mentioned earlier that I became a whistleblower, but not specifically why, which is that I feel like the whole distributed ledger technology industry, which touches all of the topics that I just mentioned, is being wrongly vilified because they're thinking, US dollars or euros versus Bitcoin, which is just not what it is. I'm talking about legacy technologies, big tech, Web 2, technologies that are opaque, where it's very easy to commit crimes, where crimes against individuals and against governments are undertaken every single day, where it's not compatible with human rights, where we have a lack of transparency, a complete lack of consent, where it's impossible for you to earn a living on most popular platforms, where all of your rights are taken away from you. And moving into Web3, blockchain, crypto. Remember, crypto stands for encryption, not cryptocurrencies.
Crypto stands for encryption, not cryptocurrencies. I actually didn't know that.
Crypto stands for encryption. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about blockchain technology and distributed ledger, we're talking about really advanced forms of encryption that most traditional technologies do not use. That's why it's so easy for people to get hacked. That's why it's impossible to tell whether Cambridge Analytica deleted a Facebook data set or not, which kicked off that entire data scandal. Because we can't even look at a database and tell whether data was transferred to another company or whether it was deleted or kept or used. These technologies should be legacy. They should be something that are left in the past. It is not safe to use technologies like this. It is not intelligent to use technologies like this. It is impossible to protect your rights or our democracy or our country with technologies like that.
Right.
The whole point of using advanced forms of encryption is for cybersecurity, is for personal liberty, it's for rights protection, it's for transparency, consent, permission structures. All of these concepts are so essential to moving technology forward and to making technology both more ethical and compatible with our civil and human rights. And so I think this whole conversation gets lost in politics when people are thinking that it's Bitcoin versus the dollar. Maybe to some people that's what it is, but at its core, and especially to someone like me that is an activist in the data protection and cybersecurity and privacy space, trying to squash technologies that, without a doubt, it is impossible to argue that they make technology safer, that they make technology better, that they make technology more reliable and transparent and consensual, that it's impossible to think that we would not want that to happen. And it's really, really shocking that some of the same legislators that claim to have regulating Facebook be one of their top issues, that also stopping crypto is also one of their top issues. Because if you want to make Facebook ethical, you should start using better technology on the back end of it so that people can't be abused, and so that Russian hackers can't pay to influence elections on Facebook. All of these things are preventable with smart contracts, with blockchain technology. And I think a lot of people lose that essential point, which is really how I ended up in this industry at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, you make extremely good points. I think a lot of it is a misunderstanding. Cryptocurrency and blockchain are not the same thing. Like, they go hand in hand, but I think people hear blockchain regulators and they immediately think Bitcoin. Oh, that's bad. And the US dollar and like money laundering and drugs and Silk Road. But it's like blockchain as a technology, just as you mentioned, has so much potential. And that's how I became involved in the industry in 2017. Blockchain for supply chain management. You can track and trace goods easily because everything is permanent and put on that ledger and it's tamper proof. So I think what we really need is awareness, and we need regulators to understand the difference between blockchain, cryptocurrency. I mean, yeah, just...
I'm going to riff on that and join you at money laundering and criminal activity.
Okay.
So most money laundering happens through banks with dollars. Start there. Number two, if you wish to commit criminal activity on the blockchain, you will be caught because it's trackable, traceable, and you can't delete. So why is Sam Bankman-Fried already in jail? He is in jail because he committed crimes on the blockchain.
Right.
And all of the evidence was very, very easy to find. It's right there, public information. In fact, the amount of reporting that happened on Twitter alone about Sam Bankman-Fried's crimes before the investigators even got there was incredible, because it's all public information.
Yeah.
You can search the wallets, you can figure it out with little investigative work. So that is very important, because the last biggest frauds that happened before FTX, usually around 2008, the banking crisis, Bernie Madoff, all of these different issues, took about 10 years to put those people behind bars, because everything that they did, there was no evidence. Didn't have it in a proper database. It can easily be deleted. There's no tracking and traceability of any of the activities. So if we want to prevent criminal activity and money laundering, blockchain is essential.
I agree. It's essential, and it's also kind of scary because all of that evidence is on the blockchain and it will be there forever. And it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. I think some great use cases are NFTs that show evidence of actual events taking place. And Brittany, you know all about this, actual pictures. You can take that, you can make those NFTs, you can put it on the blockchain, and you can say, hey, this event occurred because here is proof. It is an NFT on the blockchain. This is really important, especially with the emergence of AI and deep fakes and images being manipulated. So I think it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. Let's say you have some information on a blockchain network that is then used against you. A recent example of this, and I don't know if I got the press release a few days ago about Nadia, the founder of Pussy Riot. She had some NFT artwork on the blockchain. Russia didn't like it. And now I don't know if she's in prison or under arrest, but basically all of that lives on the blockchain. Anyone can see it if it's a public blockchain network. So I think it can be used for good and for bad, but I do think that if regulations here in the United States take the innovation away from companies and builders and entrepreneurs, then the Web3 sector is doomed. It's just doomed, because how will we ever advance if we cannot innovate within our own country? I don't want to move offshore. Like, I love living in the United States, and I don't want to have to feel like I have to move to Switzerland to do my job.
Absolutely. That's really why I entered in this industry in regulatory, because I thought, I'm an American. even though I didn't live in America for a lot of my life, I thought I'm an American and I need to be able to create a company in America. Like I'm going to spend a lot of my life in America. I'm an American. My whole family lives in America. My family doesn't live anywhere else. So that's where they are. If I can't do business in my own country, then why am I moving into this industry? And so after getting some sort of regulatory clarity, I started working in the for-profit part of this industry. And now that I have multiple companies in this industry, I'm shocked that 5 years later, we're like back to 2017, 2018. And I don't understand how it happened that way. Why? Well, I do understand the different factors, but it's just so incredibly frustrating because I am someone who doesn't like to give up. And most people would never make this much effort to continue to stay in this industry. We are losing millions and millions of people that would have gotten into this industry otherwise, but they're scared away. Like, I'm not afraid of the government agencies. I meet with them all the time. I'm happy to go talk to them whenever they want and answer their questions. Most people are afraid, and they have good reason to be afraid because they don't have the money to fight them in court. So we're really driving innovation abroad at a mass scale. There's tons of companies that will never come to the United States because of this lack of clarity. There's plenty of companies that will never even start in the first place. But if they do start, they're definitely going to start abroad. And that is bad for business in this country when this multi-trillion-dollar industry is only growing.
Right. However, I do think that moving forward, we're going to see some interesting things happen in the United States. I'm very curious to see what will happen between Coinbase and the SEC. I'm also curious to see how the whole Binance CFTC situation is going to play out. I don't know if these things are going to be negative or positive. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how these situations may play out moving forward?
Well, I'm certainly glad that both Coinbase and CZ at Binance are showing up and willing to have these conversations both publicly and privately with these agencies. And I'm really hoping specifically on the Coinbase side that they continue to work to meet the SEC in court. Now, for those of you that don't know, the last big case that happened with the SEC and a large exchange was with Kraken, and Kraken decided to settle out of court. Now, when you settle out of court, you don't create new legislation. So new legal precedent is what it's called, is created if you win or lose a lawsuit in court. And then judges in new lawsuits can look at it and say, okay, this is something that was already decided by a U.S. court, so therefore we can make decisions based off of that decision. For those of you that aren't legally savvy, might be technically savvy, but maybe not legally savvy. So it's a really big deal that Coinbase is going to actually take the SEC to court and see this out in court. Is it a big risk? Absolutely. Because if Coinbase loses, we're all moving to Switzerland. But if Coinbase wins, we might actually have one of the most important legislative outcomes, which is that Coinbase will be proven to be right. They have a very stringent process for deciding how they list assets and deciding whether certain assets are securities or are not. And everything listed on Coinbase, in the opinion of their very large legal team, is not a security and has met all extraneous indicators of whether something is a security or not just the typical basic government definition, but they've looked at the way these companies raise money, all of their marketing materials, everything that they've said publicly, et cetera, and so forth. There's a lot that goes into Coinbase deciding whether they'll list an asset or not. And that's why they don't list things left, right, and center. They do take a very serious decision-making process on that. And so if both those assets are deemed, if all those assets are deemed to not be securities in this case, it also might mean that staking as a service is also protected in the United States. So Coinbase, when they filed their S-1, which is the legal filing that you make in order to do an IPO, Coinbase outlined a lot of different services, including their staking as a service.
And what does staking as a service mean?
Staking as a service means that if you hold digital assets or tokens, that you can hold them with a custodian. So in your Coinbase wallet, you can hold your tokens, and you can earn off of those tokens if that network is a proof of stake network. So if it's a network where you can earn rewards for staking the amount of tokens to help run the network, then they will do that on your behalf instead of you having to manually go and do that yourself. And a lot of people feel more comfortable with a big company doing that, and instead of taking the cybersecurity risk of doing that themselves. So we could also find out that staking as a service, which right now only Puerto Rico has developed legislation around in the United States. Staking as a service has been legally defined in Puerto Rico, but it hasn't been defined anywhere else, and the SEC is saying that there's a potential issue with Coinbase even offering that service. So there's a lot at stake with this case. Everyone that is interested in this industry needs to keep your eyes focused on this case. And Coinbase also just started their own campaign, which you can join through their social media accounts, through their website. A lot of people are also saying vote with your wallet. If you have accounts at other exchanges, move some of your assets into Coinbase. If you don't have them there, show the support because they're going to need the support. They're going to spend a ridiculous amount of money on this, and they need all the support they can get. There's a whole other regulatory issue if you guys want to go into another fun one.
I think maybe briefly we can go into another fun regulatory issue just for a minute or two. But what is that fun regulatory issue, Brittany?
Just all banks that bank crypto companies being shut down by the government. That's really fun. One of the companies that I co-founded, where I'm chair of the board, we had our Signature bank account shut down. First Signature was shut down by the government after another bank was shut down for having mostly crypto clients, and then Signature was told that they could no longer have crypto clients, et cetera, and so forth. So this massive kind of banking collapse that we're seeing right now stems from originally the government actually targeting banks that had too many crypto clients. So Silvergate first, and then Signature, and et cetera, and so forth. So what we're seeing right now is the result of very poor regulatory policy, and there is definitely going to be a huge campaign that is starting right now to bring congressional oversight over the banking regulators, because the banking regulators have possibly broken many different laws in undertaking some of the actions that they have to debank crypto companies. And Congress has the right to exercise oversight over them, but we have to push them to do that. Yeah. So if you have a crypto company that has been debanked and you want to talk about it, please get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and we're going to wrap things up here. I just think it all comes down to this. This is Web3 Deep Dive. It is a show on Web3. Cryptocurrency is part of the Web3 ecosystem. And I just think that it's a shame to see what's going on within the United States, because that could hamper Web3 adoption and innovation here. And I think in order for us to build this next generation of the internet, we really need to get clarity around all of this. But like you said, Brittany, I am very excited to see what happens with Coinbase and the SEC. I believe in Coinbase. I really do. I've met their team. They're killing it. I just hope to see them succeed, and I hope to see Web3 innovation here continue to grow so we don't have to move to Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland is lovely, but it's cold, and I don't want to be cold, which is why I live in Austin. So, and you also, Puerto Rico, Austin.
Yeah, I really feel like we're just, as a country, completely missing out on a big part of what the near-term future looks like. This multi-trillion-dollar industry that will soon be worth quite a lot more than that. Moving fully outside of the United States is a lost opportunity. And just like many countries stopping relying on the U.S. dollar, if Web3 no longer relies on the United States, then we're just going to see a furthering of America no longer being a leader in the global economy in the way that it once was. And, I guess I would say that shouldn't matter to me so much. And I will make sure that it doesn't matter to me so much if this government cannot figure it out. But I will continue to spend as much time as I can stand with these legislators and regulators explaining how important this is. Otherwise, I will move back to Europe quicker than anyone will expect.
And we don't want that to happen. At least I don't, because you're a good friend of mine. And I do not want you in Europe. I've already have, my brother's living in Paris. That's bad enough. But anyways, so I think you've made brilliant points, Brittany, and it's been a pleasure having you here on Web3 Deep Dive. And I hope that we'll have some good news soon. And I think any final thoughts before we end?
For sure. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can get in touch with me at info@ownyourdata.foundation. So the Own Your Data Foundation is my 501c3 where we teach digital literacy. So everything from data rights to cybersecurity and crypto. We do that for companies, governments, and families. You can follow me at Own Your Data Now on Twitter, and most of my other handles are at Own Your Data on the different platforms. And if you really want to be a part of this legislative and regulatory movement in crypto, which if you're watching this and you're in crypto, please say yes, because this takes all of us. It's an all hands on deck thing right now. Look at the Digital Chamber of Commerce, Coin Center, Satoshi Action, and a lot of the other organizations that I'm mentioning on my social media, and back at least one, if not all of them. And if you have the ability to lend your time and your voice or your company's voice, then please say so and get on board.
Cool. Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Cool. Thanks, guys.